Hi guys, it's Tao from Shine Bright Design, and this is my commentary journal. So if you guys are not familiar with my commentary journals, I am doing a new segment called Commentary Journals, and that's basically time lapses with a bit of commentary on my progress and feedback on my piece, and a bit of self-criticism on my work and procedures. So I feel like if I do this every so often, I will really learn from my procedures and I can learn and improve the way I do things. So this is a piece I did for Inktober, and this piece is from Bloomster Mandala, which is by Maria Trolley, which is a coloring book which has a lot of fauna and flora, and it's very sweet. It's very fairy tale like. And so in this piece, I'm also featuring chameleon markers and a little bit of Faber-Castell Pitt pens. But majority of the products used are chameleon markers because I wanted to see how easily and how time consuming chameleon markers can be. Because if you're not familiar with how chameleon markers work, they basically take in a bit of blending solution, which is clear, and then once you place the marker onto paper, the clear solution comes out first, then the actual pigment in the marker, which makes it a bit time consuming because it takes time to load up the marker with that clear substance. And in saying that as well, chameleon markers are a bit potent, so I recommend working in a ventilated room as well because they have that very strong alcoholic smell, unlike Copic markers or the Faber-Castell markers, which aren't as potent. They blend really well, and in my opinion, they blend like no other marker I have seen, especially when it comes to larger spaces of color and surface. You'll see that later on. Now the reason why I'm coloring these leaves blue is, if you've been following my work, I do like to use color as underpainting color. If you're not familiar what underpainting is, it's when you use color to create a shadow rather than using black. So I like to use colors to create shadow because when they blend with other colors on top, it gives an interesting shadow effect rather than just black. Because if you look at if you're familiar with the color wheel and you see blue and red placed on top of each other, then green on top, then when the colors are mixed, it creates a shadow, but it creates a very interesting shadow that is not like black, which I think is more effective and more engaging to the eye. So the color palette of chameleon markers is currently at the moment 52, unlike Copic markers, which is, I assume, a lot more. They should, I hope, add more colors over time because there are colors that I would wish they would have, like there are some greens and some blues and some purples that they are lacking in. But obviously as the brand grows and the brand develops and learns from feedback, the color palette will improve, and also the formula will also improve. So in terms of my complaints about the smell and the color palette, they will improve in time. But if you're looking at the product itself and what the main purpose is, the main characteristics of it, it's a really good marker. Here you can see me using some red to create a shadow and interesting textures in the leaf. I love using colors to create these type of effects. I find it more interesting than just using a range of greens, blacks and whites. Using color gives a piece so much more dimension and intrigue. If I could talk about the inspiration I use for leaves, I really don't have inspiration. I just let the mind just go. I don't really use reference images for plants. Mostly reference images for things like eyes and flowers, but leaves are really not something that I focus on having a reference image for. So you can see in this footage that I'm actually spinning the paper a lot when it comes to working with chameleon markers. And the reason I do that is because it makes it a lot easier when you are doing the blending, that you move the paper to where your hand is positioned rather than moving your hand against that. I find moving the sheet of paper around makes things a lot easier. So I'm hoping that when you follow the tutorial, if you do follow the tutorial, that the spinning doesn't really bother you. Again, I love using colors to create shadow, and I'm using reds and blues in this flower. Blue is used to create shadow and red is the flower. So I think it's a lot nicer that I'm using those two colors rather than a red and black. The chameleon markers really focus on time. So when I was doing the tutorial for the chameleon markers, I would have to say out loud a count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and have that rhythm in my mind every time I was loading up the marker. And by saying things out loud, I was able to keep a consistent rhythm and thus a consistent blending pattern. The most difficult thing about chameleon markers, which a lot of people say are fussy, is that they're not able to accurately get the blending so evenly. Now for me, and I've read the pamphlets and everything that they came with, it's all about timing. So you really have to practice your timing. So your rhythm, so you really need to develop a rhythm when you're working with these chameleon markers. Always having like a countdown when you're doing certain pieces. If you start a berry, for example, and it's a smaller surface, I do 5 seconds. If you're doing something like the fur of the bunny or the mouse, I would go 10 seconds because it's the largest space of area. Now, I did have a bit of color issues when it came to flowers, but it was because that I feel like these chameleon markers are lacking in a color palette. They need to add more. And obviously I felt like I wanted like a red flower, but they didn't have the right red I wanted, and I ended up doing like a pink flower, which didn't suit the whole color scheme. And then I wasn't paying attention and I made a mistake with one of the blending issues, or the blending of the petals. So then I just ended up coloring the whole flower a red. Now when I said that chameleon markers are really good for large areas, when you look at the mouse you can see why. Because there are no patches. It's very seamless. When you look at it, you can't see those points where they overlap. And you know, I even have this issue with Copic markers. When I'm doing large backgrounds, if you looked at my first chameleon marker tutorial and you see the background, you can see it's patchy because every point that overlaps is a bit darker. Whereas with this mouse, using it as an example, it's a larger area of paper covered by one ink. And it's even. Now I don't know what it is, maybe it's the formula that they have, but it's a damn good formula. Excuse the language, but it's a really good formula and it blends really well. And I feel like the whole technology behind it just makes the brand even better. Of course, everything will improve over time, but if they're doing really well on the market, if people start to take onto them, I think they could improve. So in my opinion, I know a lot of people are saying that it's really fussy, it's too fiddly. It is, but the pros outweigh that negative. It is a bit time consuming, it is a bit fiddly and hard to just pick up, but once you pick it up, the formula of the markers, regardless of the scent, it applies beautifully. Because I've never had something blend so evenly. I was expecting a bit of patchiness where markers would overlap, but there was none at all. It was very seamless. And I think it's the way the formula, it has to do with the formula, I reckon, because how it has to blend out, it has to gradiate. It has to do with that ink. It has to do with that whole formula, and that's why this whole mouse is so evenly blended. You can't even see the overlaps. So I did the mother a lot darker because babies are generally lighter. And I did the butterfly in Faber-Castells just to mix things up, but you don't have to do it in Faber-Castells. I did the butterfly in black first, and that was a mistake. And I went over it in white. So guys, we all make mistakes and we all can learn from them. And at the end of the day, it's not the end all. If you do something you don't like, you can always fix it. It's just paper anyway. But I like to not be too attached to my work or too planned, because I feel like when I plan things, it doesn't go my way, or when I plan things, I have too high of an expectation of how it turns out. So I do some final finishing touches with gold gel pens, white Posca pens, and I just do some highlights in certain areas. I felt like this piece didn't really need that much, extraness, because I'm quite extra when it comes to my style. I always like to take things to the next level and go some bling in that. But I went in with the Posca pen and added first strokes, and it made it really 3D, really nice. And I just think it's a lovely piece. So guys, I hope you have enjoyed my commentary, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and that you subscribe to my channel. Click that notification button, give me likes, and if you have any questions, comment below. So guys, that's all from me, and I'll see you guys for the next one. Bye!